Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. Don't mind what's going on back there. We're doing our own thing. We'll let her have her space. My husband is in the army, so your house is mine now. So where I live, there's a small army base, and around it is a housing estate where the families live. Part of this estate was sold to a couple of housing associations, and I live in one of those. The army families move around a lot, so people in those houses generally move every 2 years or so, some a little more frequently, others less so. There's a row of 4 terrace houses directly across from me, and one of them was empty, ready for new tenants. Here's where we begin. I took my daughter to nursery, and then went shopping for some new clothes. This was at 9 a.m. I get back at 11:30 a.m. and see a large moving truck in the street. To avoid them, I go to the other side of my property. I suffer from chronic anxiety and tend to avoid most people. I go in the front door and take the new clothes upstairs to sort. Whilst I'm there, I hear noise from my back garden and door. Looking out the window, I see a man with a large toolbox trying to open my back door, a woman behind him looking furious, and the guys from the moving company standing around with boxes looking bored. I run downstairs and open the door, meaning the guy, who I guess was a locksmith, practically fell through the door into my kitchen. He was surprised, of course, and after looking around he was confused, because clearly someone already lived here. The woman then sighs dramatically and thanks me for finally turning up, because they've been here since 8 a.m. trying to get in. She just wants to get her stuff in so she and her kids can sleep. She waves the moving guys forward and then goes to get her kids out of her car. I'm busy trying to stop the moving guys from coming in with boxes, and her 2 kids, about 3 and 6, come charging into my garden. I've got a slide, swing, small trampoline, and Wendy house there for my daughter to play with. I yell at them to all get out of my garden and stay away from my house. One of the movers looks into the window of my living room, sees all of my furniture in there, and waves his team back to the truck. His team leader pulls out some paperwork and begins going over it. The woman starts yelling at me, telling me that I was a liar and a thief, among other things. I've lived in this house for 4 years, and tell her such, but she's having none of it. She gets right up in my face, screaming at me, and I'm having trouble not bursting into tears and running away, or decking her. The locksmith tries to calm her down, and she starts having a go at him next. I call up the local police station. There's one in the housing estate, but it generally only caters to the army people and such. I figured calling them to deal with her was the best solution. They arrive after a few minutes and take the woman aside. Her kids are still playing on my daughter's things, so I tell them to get off and go to their mother because those toys don't belong to them. They go reluctantly, and when their mother notices, she begins yelling again. Apparently those toys aren't mine. They were put there by the army for her kids because her husband is such a wonderful soldier. That this is her house and I'm just a squatter trying to steal it from her. This is when the movers came over and tell her this is the wrong address. She's moving into number 4, and this is number 14. She goes very silent, grabs her kids, and leaves the garden. I call out to ask her if she's going to pay for the damage done to my garden. The grass was torn up by her kids and the movers. My door, from what looks like footprints trying to kick in, and the scratches from the locksmith. My bushes by the gate, the movers and her yanking at them whilst waiting for the locksmith. She tells me no, because she's done nothing wrong, which is when I inform her that I have cameras installed that would have seen the whole thing. I ask the officers if they would like to view the footage, and one of them watches the whole incident take place once I bring out my laptop. And he says he doesn't have anything to collect the footage just now, but he'll come back later to get it. He also tells me that he will have to report the woman's behavior to the base, as a family's bad behavior can have repercussions for their soldiers too. It's now 5 p.m. The officers were collecting copies of the footage in case it was needed, and might be shown to certain army officials as an example of her behavior. The husband turned up about an hour ago, and there was a huge argument across the street. Everyone could hear it, but not exactly what was being said. Either way, this family hasn't exactly had a good start to their time here. I can only hope they move away soon, so I don't have to deal with that woman again. You'd think that when people get a new house, they would actually go look at it and pick out the house before they move in. I don't know, maybe it's just an army thing to just show up to a new house and be like, alright, this is where we live now. But wouldn't you feel like there were some red flags if the people living in that house already were very well established there? Oh well, if everyone was logical, then we wouldn't have entertaining stories. Free load off my Wi-Fi? Get snipped. Wanted to join in on the Wi-Fi fun. This is my Choosing Beggar story. This was about 12 years ago, when I was 13 years old at the time, and me and a couple of my neighborhood friends would play Halo 3 online. My next door neighbor, who at the time didn't have internet connection, felt left out, and being the good friend that I am, offered him my Wi-Fi password so he can join in. A week passes, and he complains the internet is slow, as he lives on the 4th floor of his apartment, and I live in a 2-floor home. He then asked me to ask my parents to upgrade our plan so he can get faster speeds. I laughed and said no. Fast forward a week, and me and 5 of my neighborhood friends are on Xbox Live Party, including the Choosing Beggar. and one of my other friends mentions it was nice that I let ChoosingBeggar run a 100-foot Ethernet cable to my router. I'm confused. As the ChoosingBeggar is telling him to shut up, I go upstairs to check. The router was in my brother's room next to the window. This dude brought a 100-foot cable to run from his room into the attic into my brother's room upstairs. He did this while I was away and told my parents I let him do this. So at this point, I'm furious, and all my friends are laughing, including the ChoosingBeggar. So as he is laughing, I grab a pair of scissors and snip the cable and throw it in his backyard and change my Wi-Fi password. He didn't play with us for 2 months until he finally convinced his parents to get internet. The torture of him listening about all our online fun when we hung out was payback enough for me. Well, these are some pretty intense interactions for a 13-year-old. I gotta wonder how many people actually are on good enough terms with their neighbors that sharing Wi-Fi is just okay. A dad at a preschool I taught at told me how to calm his daughter down, but I knew it wouldn't work out like he thought it would. So I took a few years off of college to figure out what I wanted to major in, and during that time I worked at a really great preschool. This was a Montessori school in a really high-end area, so the parents were all pretty wealthy. A significant number of children had live-in nannies, and the staff and I saw the kids more often than their parents got to. For the most part, the parents were extremely nice and respectful, albeit a little bit absent. So I was a guide in a 3 to 6 classrooms, and absolutely adored all of my littles. In the mornings, we had to hook up and drop off lines where cars lined up, and staff removed the children from car seats and walked them to their classrooms. This made the transition from home to school much easier than if the parents walked their child in. It also kept parents from lingering in the classroom and disrupting the child's work cycle too much. For children that could walk, they were also expected to carry their own backpack and lunchboxes. Some days, of course, kids just had bad days, and we would help them carry their things in. One morning, one of my 3-year-olds was having a rough transition and sobbed the entire time we were getting out of the car. Her dad was talking on Bluetooth and seemed frustrated with the situation, but didn't say anything to me. I got the child out of the car, still sobbing, and I asked her if she wanted to carry her backpack, and that I could carry her lunchbox. She seemed to like this compromise and handed me her lunchbox while I helped put her backpack on. She's still sniffling a little bit, but calming down overall. The dad, still talking on his Bluetooth, pulls up to the driveway but rolls his window down and gestures at me. The child and I stop and look at him curiously, thinking he's going to tell his daughter he loved her or goodbye. Instead, he snappily tells me, "Well, if you would just give her her lunchbox to carry, she would stop crying." And then he looked expectantly at the lunchbox. I didn't want to piss his dad off, but I knew pretty well this little girl did not feel like carrying her lunchbox. These were not small lunchboxes. They were big, bulky, and probably weighed about half as much as the small children. They had to be big enough to fit the child's lunch in individualized glass Tupperware containers. Every child carried the same lunchbox, and the lid could snap on and off, but it wasn't supposed to. Anyway, I looked at the father and said, "Of course, I'll let her carry it," and handed the girl the lunchbox. In a complete shriek, she yells, "I don't want this!" and proceeds to slam the lunchbox on the concrete walkway, causing the lid to break off and all of her lunch items to go rolling around the parking lot. And she immediately starts sobbing again. I simply looked up to make eye contact with the dad, and he looked so embarrassed. He didn't say a word, and he just slowly rolled up his passenger side window and drove away. After morning hookup was over, we had to call him to bring his daughter another lunch because her main portions were ruined. Aw, these tragic stories about being in preschool. Do you think I can send Faye to a kiddie preschool? The Lecherous Judge. So I worked at a popular department store in the LA area in my early 20s that was across the street from a local courthouse. We saw cops, lawyers, and judges in the men's accessories department quite often. But there was this one judge that was extremely flirtatious, and he would ask us girls out for lunch all the time. He really liked me. I was curvy and blonde. Must have been his type. He came in at around 3 p.m. one afternoon, kept trying to touch and grab me, really laying it on thick. I was embarrassed by his lewd comments and told him no repeatedly. My coworker rang him up so I could hide in the bathroom until he left. It was disgusting and humiliating. That night, my parents went to eat at a Red Lobster about 3 miles from the store, so I met them at the restaurant after work. Being a Friday night, it was busy, and I found my family outside the front doors waiting for our party to be called. Guess who was also waiting? Yep, the judge. There he sat with his wife. He'd seen me and was trying not to make eye contact. I told my grandma what the judge had done that day at my store, and she was pissed. She took my arm and guided me to stand next to her, right in front of the judge. At first I was embarrassed, but then I realized how uncomfortable we were making him. But then my grandma started a conversation with the wife. It felt glorious watching the judge squirm and sweat. Ultimately, we never saw him in the store again. See, some people just need to learn when to give up. And only flirt if you're wanted, huh? Well, I think it's time that we move to the question now that the cat is leaving me alone for a little bit. What's a rule that was implemented somewhere that massively backfired? My city has issues with loud bikes and vehicles, so as a deterrent, the city put up decibel meters that displayed how loud your engine is, similar to those signs that read your speed and display it to you. But instead of deterring anyone, people would pull up to these signs and rev the heck out of their engines to see who could get the highest decibel count. The city took the counters down within a week. Yeah, whoever tried to come up with this rule clearly does not understand car people. A buddy of mine told me about a happy hour promotion a bar ran close to his campus. Apparently the special was something stupid like 50-cent beers that lasted until the first person went to the bathroom. As he tells it, the first few weeks went without incident, but once it got more popular, people were going to extreme lengths to not be that guy, including wearing adult diapers. Once people tried to covertly pee in corners and trash cans, the bar canceled the promotion. Yeah, some things can sound like fun promotional games, but sometimes they have consequences you didn't really think about. I worked for a marketing firm that often locked you out of the building if you weren't back to your cubicle by the second your break was up. They revoked your break the next day as punishment. This is not legal here in New York State. They got into a lot of trouble. I always think it's so weird when there's rules that's like, if you don't come here, then we are going to lock you out. Or another example, it's like, we don't want you to park here, so if you park here, we're gonna put a boot on your car so that you can't leave. Because yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When Domino's said all pizzas would be delivered in 30 minutes or less, your pizza was free. All the delivery drivers kept getting in car accidents to get your pizza to you on time, so it wouldn't come out of their paycheck. It was a short-lived venture. I mean, I can understand them like trying to get the employees who make the pizzas to work faster, but it really doesn't do anyone good if you're trying to get the drivers to get there faster. But hey, I think there was a movie about this once, and people would order pizza from all the way across town just so that it would take more than 30 minutes. My company has a strict no alcohol policy. You can't begin work within 10 hours of having had a drink. So whenever there's a staff shortage and they need me to come in right away, guess who just cracked open a cold one? See, this is what happens when you try and just generalize rules. Like, okay, if someone gets completely smashed, then don't let them come to work for another 10 hours or so. But when you have such a generalized rule like that, it's so easy to take advantage of. English law in Wales set the death penalty for stealing a sheep. Welshmen caught stealing sheep would claim to be making love to them. They would get a lesser penalty for bestiality. The consequence of this is the Welshmen gained a reputation as sheep shackers. Oh yeah, gotta love it when a more severe crime has a lesser punishment than another one. So people just intentionally go the extra mile to do the more severe crime to get the lesser punishment. I worked at Macy's one Christmas and found out the reason why you can never find anyone at the registers is because they don't allow employees to stand at the register, because it's intimidating. I can't tell you how many times I gave up trying to purchase something there because I couldn't find anyone to ring me up. Yeah, I have noticed that. In the maybe once every couple of years when I stop by a department store, sometimes I have to just wander around the store for 15 minutes just to get out of the store. It's kind of ironic that in their goal to become less intimidating of trying to sell you things, they just come across as being more incompetent and incapable of selling you things. At one point in history, the president of Paraguay tried to eliminate racism by making it illegal to marry someone within your own ethnic group. Needless to say, this was quite racist. Yeah, I kind of feel like the whole definition of racism just keeps getting watered down year after year. Air pollution became a big problem in late 80s, early 90s Athens, mostly due to the number of old, heavily polluting cars on the road. So the Greek government made a law where only cars with odd-numbered final digits on their number plates could be driven on odd-numbered days, and only even-numbered cars could be driven on evenly numbered days. Sounds great, doesn't it? They'll have the number of cars on their roads right. Nope, they doubled it. Everyone bought an old, highly polluting car that had an odd-numbered plate and another with an even-numbered plate. Nobody could park and the air was worse than before. You know, there's a lot of control freaks out there that think that if we just make enough rules, we can just control people and we can make everyone be good. We'll solve all of our problems if we just force them into being good. But guess what? You can't change human nature just by forcing restrictions on them. You know, that's the theme of this whole question. It's basically there's people on top who always say, we don't like it when people do this certain thing, so we are going to ban it or punish anyone who does it, and then that will completely eliminate it. It's like when people say, oh, we'll just tax rich people and take all of their money. Therefore, we get all of the money that the rich people make and we'll be rich. But what really happens is that the rich people just say, alright, well if you're going to take all my money, then I'm just going to hide it or not make the money in the first place. Or if you try and say something like, oh, let's just ban all guns or ban all drugs. That way, we won't have any of those things, right? You know, why don't we just put very strict and very specific rules on every single person so that nobody can ever act up and we'll all be perfect and living in a utopia, also known as North Korea. I mean, I could go on libertarian rants forever, but I'll just repeat my last point. You can't change human nature just by trying to restrict what they're allowed to do. But that about does it for today, so hope you guys are having a good week, and I'll talk to you guys next time. What? What do you want? Are you thirsty?